and welcome to our Crochet Designs. My name is Mary and today we are working on part 2 of our Trebleberry Boxy Jumper. Getting exciting now. We're this close to finishing but not yet. Part 2, what we're going to do is we're going to create the top part of your jumper, yes, and of course we're going to sort out where we're going to put our sleeves, and of course we're going to start our sleeves, and then I will send you off on your own so that you can complete your sleeves. All right, so what will you need for this tutorial today? Pretty much exactly the same thing you used for part 1. And if you are joining us new, firstly, welcome. Secondly, if you haven't created part 1 of our Trebleberry Boxy Jumper, I will leave a link to that part in the description box down below, very first link you come to, and go ahead, start the jumper, come back over, join us here for part 2 of your Trebleberry Boxy Jumper. Check it out. I'm not going to talk anymore, guys. I'm just going to let you get started. Good luck. Alrighty, guys, what you should have now are 2 pieces like this. They look like just 2 large squares with a little tiny bit of ribbing down the bottom. Now, quick thing to let you know, see this ribbing down the bottom? From there to the bottom of the ribbing, from there to there is 5 centimeters or 2 inches. The question you need to ask yourself is, when you pop a ribbing later, this is all happening later, but you need to know now for your measurement, how high up do you want your ribbing to go? So you're going to need another 5 centimeters or 2 inches on top of where we are right here. So mine would probably reach right around there. Now that's where our little dint is. Mine would reach right just underneath it by a couple, whatever, a centimeter, 2 centimeters, doesn't matter. Now, if you want to make your top way up here, remember this is a boxy jumper, so it's going to be a little bit loose. Making a tight jumper really doesn't work, all right? So your jumper really should lay like that, okay? If you want to get it close, you can. Remember, it's got to go over your head. So when you do your next 5 centimeters or 2 inches, it's going to go right up to here. So you've got to be wary. This has got to go over your head, yeah? So what you do, grab your piece, calculate your stitches all the way across, count them, whether that's 100, 120, whatever you've got, divide it in half, whether that's 60, whatever, okay? So all you're doing is you're dividing your piece in half, popping your stitch marker right in that middle stitch. If you've ended up with 2 middle stitches, that's fine. Pop one, on each stitch. So don't stress. If yours is an even amount of row, that's fine. Just pop them on each side. That's fine, okay? As long as you work out pretty much a center stitch, or let's say for argument's sake, it goes right into that. Remember that little tiny gap I was speaking about in part 1? Okay, so that your stitch marker needs to go, or stitch markers need to go in that tiny little hole right there for now, okay? This is just so that you can work out how far down you want your ribbing, or how far up, I should say, you want your ribbing to go. So let's say if you want, let me grab the other piece so you can understand what I mean. I'm going to grab the ribbing of the other piece just for fun. I'm going to pop it under the jumper, all right? Just for fun, to see what the ribbing would look like, all right? So if I pop my little, stitch marker there, just raise everything up. It's in the middle, yeah? This is where, my stitch markers, oh, come on, get it right, Mary. The ribbing's not even out yet, all right? This is where my jumper will land, right there. That's where mine's going to go. It's going to go like that. Right, still going to have a couple of fingers or 2 centimeters or an inch or whatever, 2 inches away from my head. So mine's going to be a little bit rounder, like so. Yeah, way up to about there it'll reach. My little gap there is there, and it'll reach just under it. If you want to know exactly how far under mine's going to reach from that little tiny gap right there, I'll tell you in a moment. Believe it or not, exactly 5 centimeters and 2 inches down from that little gap right there down to where I want my ribbing to end. All right, so that's that, which means putting away this piece so you don't get confused. I just wanted to show you what it would look like once that section was done. All right, so grab your measuring tape. Yes, grab your little stitch marker, pop it right in that little hole right there. Bring that, your piece, don't worry about that, right over to as far over as you want your ribbing to go. So if your ribbing is here, right there, say if your ribbing is there, you need to bring it back 5 centimeters or 2 inches, and that is exactly where you place your stitch marker. I'll do it on one that I haven't completed, so you understand, yeah? All right, so you grab your piece. This one hasn't been done yet, so I'm going to pop it right in the center of my little gap there. Go right over here, grab my measuring tape, and get as close as I can to the camera without it blurring. Where's my 5? So what I did was, that's where I want my ribbing to end, right? So I get my 5 centimeters or 2 inches. I go right across where my finger is and place my stitch marker in there like that. All right. So from here, if I want to check it again to see that it is okay, I pop that in the middle. I pop that there. I'll measure my 5 centimeters across or my 2 inches, and it'll land just above there, which is where I want my ribbing to stop. If you want your ribbing to stop over here, then move your stitch marker over the 5 centimeters or the 2 inches. If you want your ribbing to stop a little closer, move your stitch marker over. This is where I want mine to stop. From here, you count your stitches from there to there, yes? Then you go to the other side, you count it from there to where, to the same amount this is. So from there to there, you go from that side all the way to the same amount. Let's say that's, I don't know what that is, 22, 30, don't know, just guessing. Let's say that's 30, then you need to count 30 from there to there. Okay, do you know what I mean? So that way you've got your shoulder sections done. When you get your stitch markers in place, we will be working along that section right there. We'll be working up there to there. We'll be working up there to there. And then you need to do it on the other side as well. There is one other thing I forgot to mention, and that was the measurement of the whole entire length. And that is from the bottom all the way to the top of your shoulders. So now let's get close. All right. So when we were talking before about, I'm sorry that you can't see my face. I do apologize there, guys, but it's so much easier for me to show you like this. We were talking about that little tiny dint right there, and I said to you, this is exactly how many centimeters away from there I want to be, and the rest of it, yeah? Now you have to focus from here. You have to measure from there, where you are, all the way, let's see if I can show you, to the middle of your shoulders. Now, if you're lucky enough to have a nice little top like this that actually shows you the middle, when you work your piece, all you need to do is work it right up to that line on the top that you are wearing, making sure not to move this. Okay, now I know for me that I needed 4 rows of trebles and the 4 rows of single crochet. So I already knew that when I did my measurements a long time ago, and I don't focus too much on measurement. What I do actually is I just keep doing these rows until I think it suits right there. So, but you guys, if you wanted to work on measurement, check that it's long enough. Once you've got your, in fact, I'll pop mine on so you can see it because I've already done mine. Okay, so let me pop it on. I've even got the little tiny sleeve hole place. Okay, like that. Okay, oh, I've got a thread. Oh, my sleeve hole's come undone, but that's okay. I'm not worried about it. All right, so I pretty much know that that's the length. Let me go back a bit, that I want mine. But if I was to say not attach it, put the stitch markers in first, and I realised it was far too high like that, I would take it off and do another row of trebles, because trebles are really, really tall. They're like, you know, pretty tall, yeah? So it's going to take up a lot of space. So it's up to you how far you want yours to go down. But I know for me, it was from here, it was 4 rows trebles and 4 rows single crochets. So let's head back to the workstation and do our treble and single crochet rows until our desired length. Alrighty guys, so what you should have is a stitch marker in the center of your work and a stitch marker on either side of that center. Now I calculated mine across to be 37 stitches across that way. So what I did was I did 37 stitches across that way so that they're both even, giving me plenty of gap in the middle for my neck, and it's actually quite a big gap. So once I put my 2 inches or 5 centimeters up, it won't close my neck up real tight and make it hard for the jumper to go over my head. All right. And again, everyone is different, so if you wanted to do the same as mine, you can, but remember our measurements are different. All right, you need to go by your measurements. So what you should have ended up with here, all right, is the final row of your single crochets. You should have done a row of your trebles and then a row of your single crochet. And I said, once you complete your row of single crochet, stop there, don't cast off. Now, if you've cast it off, that's fine. Just re-add your thread in this corner. But remember, when you get your row of single crochets done, you need to chain 4 up. And I think I've chained 1 there. Just take it undone and start from the beginning so I don't confuse you. So you get to your single crochet row. Yes. Let's get a nice close up. Chain 4. 1, 2, 3 and 4. All right, turn your work like you would normally. Yes, you're turning, you're turning, you're turning. Okay, let's get that close up again. Now remember your first stitch, mine was a front loop, so I'm going to pop my treble in the front loop of my stitch. Okay, and my treble, the next one right there is a back loop, and you can tell by the way it pushes back. All right, so I'm going to pop one in the back loop. I don't know what you started off with. I'm assuming you started off with the same that I did. So this part is easy, yes? So you're going front loop, back loop with your trebles all the way across until you get to your stitch marker. All right, so go ahead, do your front loop, back loop as you would any other row. Get to a stitch right before your stitch marker, and I'll meet you back here in a moment. Alrighty guys, so here I am at the end of my row. Now before you go any further, like I've got 1 stitch left there and then we go into the next stitch. Before we go any further, what I want you to do is to make sure your trebles all match up. Now they should, because it's like any other row that we have done until we got to this section here where I asked you to stop. So now I'll just grab your work. My very last stitch, there's my back loop, treble from the one below. Now I'm doing a front loop for the second last stitch. I don't know what you're doing, just do whichever one it is. Pop your stitch in that second last stitch. Now in that last stitch, you are popping your treble in the full single crochet, not a back loop or a front loop, okay? So just do your yarn over your hook like normal, take out your stitch marker, and this is your last stitch for this row, okay? So you take out your stitch marker, pop it in the full stitch. So you're putting it through both the loops, okay? So you're just doing a normal treble in that stitch there, all right? Because it is a closing stitch. Now what you're going to do, you're going to chain 1. Turn your work. You're not going to continue along here, okay? You're going to chain 1 and turn your work. And you're going to work on these 37 stitches until you get to the length that you want. So let's just start the very next row. Turn your work like you would any other round row. All right, and there's your very first single crochet stitch. You are popping your first single crochet, and now this row is exactly the same as any one of your single crochet rows. All right, so what I would like for you to do is to continue putting your single crochets in all your stitches all the way across until you get to your last stitch like normal, and wait for me there. Alrighty guys, at this stage you should have your treble rows done and you should be at the end of your single rows. Now have a careful look. I've actually forgotten to pop my stitch marker in those, you know, the top of that chain 4. So it's going to be tricky for me to find, but look carefully and you will just pop your hook in there and you just finish off your single crochet row. All right, so now I should have 37 trebles across, and I should have now 37 single crochets for my measurement. Make sure your single crochets are the same amount as your trebles that you ended off with at the end of the row. Okay, check your numbers and make sure yours add up. Don't do it with mine because mine is totally different to your measurements, yeah? Just be wary of that. Now what you're going to do, you see your treble and your single crochet row? You're going to continue, let me pop a stitch marker, which I didn't do and I should have, at the very first single crochet that we did. All right, there. Okay, so what you should do now is do your treble rows and your single crochet rows over and over and over again until you come to your desired length. Now, what was your desired length, I hear you ask? Like I showed you before, you checked from the top of your shoulders. Remember that little dent that you had in your neck? Yes, you measured from there to there with your ribbing. Yes, then you moved right across and you measure from the bottom of your work right there all the way up to however high you want yours to go. So let's say you wanted 60 centimeters, you measure from there, you get to here and you say, oops, I'm only on 52, I need to do another 4 centimeters or whatever it is you need to do, and you keep going there. Now, if you're anything like me, okay, I'll let you know how many rows I did, so you know. Okay, I did 1 treble, 2, 3, 4 trebles and 4 single crochets of the rows. All right, but that is my measurement. Don't forget, I am short from my shoulders to my waistline. Don't tell anyone. Okay, so it's 1, 2, 3, 4 rows of treble and 4 rows of single crochet. However, I've already done 1 row of treble, 1 row of single crochet. I just need to do 3 rows treble and 3 rows single crochet for one side for now. All right, so from here you are going to chain up your 1, 2, 3 and 4. Turn your work and you're going to start your work like normal, yes? And off you go, exactly the same, all the way across your work like normal. Okay, so that's what I want you to do. Head off on your own, yes, and do the amount of rows you need for your work. Now I'm going to need to do another 3 rows trebles and 3 rows single crochet, exactly the same. When you get to this stitch right here, let me show you close up. Whatever your stitch was on your second last one, that's what you need to do. So mine is a front loop treble here. When you get to your single crochet, you just do the treble in your single crochet stitch. This is at the end of the row when you turn over and you're going there. All right, so you've got your stitch marker there. When you get there, do exactly that. Do the stitch that you have there and then do a normal treble in the top of your normal stitch. Okay, but for the rest of it, you just continue doing that. 3 rows trebles, 3 rows single crochet, or whatever your rows match up to in length, and I will meet you back here in a moment. Alrighty guys, what you should have is all of your rows. I neglected to say, which I left a little disclaimer up the top anyway, to end in your single crochet row. So there's my single crochet row, and look what happened to me, the very last row, and I had to add a new thread. Don't you love it? I lost the yarn chicken. But anyway, this happens a lot with me. But anyway, I didn't judge that very well, did I? Never mind. All right, so what we're going to do now, leave yourself a really nice long tail. We're going to use the tail to sew our fronts and our backs together. So in the meantime, I don't know, as much as you want. I just kind of double the length like that. It ends up too much with me anyway, but I better be safe than sorry. All right, now before you do anything, you got to the very last stitch of your single crochet, yes? So let's take that undone. Let's pretend like I haven't done it. And I'm into my last stitch of single crochet like so, yes? Then we're going to pull a loop through and just pull that really Two long tail through, giving it a gentle tug. All right, now this is where we need to do the opposite side. Now, remembering how we were on the opposite side, if you remember correctly, let me show you. You started from there, you did your single crochet row all the way across, then you got to the other side and you turned and started to do your treble rows. Yes, so we're on the other side. Yes, this is the side that we ended off with our single crochet row. Now we're going to flip our work and pretend that we're starting on this side, which we really are, but then we're going to go right over to our stitch marker. Now remember, your stitch marker needs to be placed in the stitch of your stitch count. Now mine, I think, ended up to be 37 trebles across. I'm not sure what you had, but mine was 37, so I'm just going to pop my hook into the stitch marker. All right, into the stitch marker, not the middle one, but the one on the outer edge, if that makes sense. And we're going to grab the yarn again and pop our thread through. All right, so you just pull it through to your stitch, grab your little tail end, give it a bit of a tug, give yourself a nice long tail. That's just for weaving in later. Okay, so here we're going to pretend, which we are, like we're doing our normal treble row. So you're going to chain up 4, 1, 2, 3 and 4. Now I forgot to do this before, but pop your stitch marker in this stitch right here, because I probably would have confused you a little bit, but there you go. Right there. I'm not going to confuse you in this round. All right, so from here, now if you look carefully, okay, you have to find out exactly what that next stitch is. But I'm in a front loop stitch. So my very next stitch, and its stitch is right above it. Let me show you right above it. So there's your front, your back loop there, and right above it on an angle is the stitch we're going into. So I've got to put a back loop in that back loop, if that makes sense. Yeah. So yarn over your hook twice, and we're going to pop it in the back loop. Actually, I might just drop the tail. It's only going to confuse you. Okay. So we're going to pop it in the back loop of the very next stitch for me. Now, if you are in your back loop now, then you need to pop it in a front loop. But I'm in my front loop now, so I'm going to pop it in the back loop. Okay, like so. It's a little different this side because we are working from the middle instead of the edge, the outer edge of your work. But it's almost the same. You're still doing your back and fronts. You've just got to make sure that they marry up, and I'll show you that in a minute. So just keep going and doing about, I don't know, 4 or 5 stitches, and then we'll have a look at it so you can see how they marry up. I think that'll do. We'll just do that many. That'll do, so I can show you. All right, so when you look at your work, if you see very carefully, that's my front, that's my front, that's my back, that's my back. And it'll kind of look like that. Just straighten it up, and then when you straighten it up, you'll see that it marries up with the bottom row. All right, so continue your trebles in your front loop and your back loop all the way to the end of this row, and I shall meet you there in a moment. Alrighty guys, here we are at the end of the row. Now if you're anything like me, you didn't put your stitch marker in the very last stitch. so that you don't get confused, I'll show you where we are. This is my last treble, which was your back loop. It's always been the back loop all the way through. So yarn over my hook twice, and right in that stitch, we're putting it through both the loops in the last stitch. Okay, we're using our last stitch right there. Okay, so from here, what are we going to do? What we've been doing in every row. Chain 1, turn our work, and you guessed it, single crochet all the way across. But you know what we're going to do? We're going to pop our stitch marker in the first stitch. Like that, single crochet right there. Grab your stitch marker, if you can. Grab your stitch marker, pop it in there, and this way we won't get confused like yours truly did before. Shh, don't tell anyone. All right, so single crochet across your row like so. Now you know how to do this part, super duper easy. You've been doing this all along, and I'm going to let you go ahead and do that get to that stitch marker right there, and I shall meet you there in a moment. Alrighty guys, here we are at the end of the row, and like I mentioned earlier, it is a better idea to pop those stitch markers in because now I know where my last stitch is. It can get a little confusing with the trebles as to where your last stitch is. So you do a normal single crochet in that last stitch. Oops, taking out that stitch marker. There you go. Alright, so what you have now is pretty much the start of the exact same piece that you did on this side. You started that side. Alright, so now this is what you need to do. See that? What you did there? That's it. You're doing that all the way up until you get to the same measurement as your opposite side. And for me, that's another 3 treble rows and 3 single crochet rows, ending on a single crochet row. That's my piece. I don't know how long your boxy is going to be. When we get to the top, probably before you cut this section here, we should have checked it on us. But when we get to the top of this section here, before we attach the fronts to the back, we're going to see if this is the right size for us. All right, so head off on your own, do the amount of rows that you need to finish your side, and I shall meet you back here in a moment. Alrighty guys, here we are at the end of the row. Now this is our final row, but you need to make sure you've got your measurement right, okay? So you single crochet into your last stitch, like so. And there you go. Now you chain 1 like you've been doing all along, pull up a nice long tail, as long as you like. Oops, and it's falling off the table, guys. Okay, and just give it a cut and get ready for what's going to happen next. All right, so what we're going to do, you can take out your stitch marker if you like. I would leave them in for a moment, and I'll tell you why. If you've taken them out, it doesn't matter. All right, so what you're going to do, pop a stitch marker in the first and last stitch of each row that you've just completed. First and last stitch of that piece and the first and last stitch of that piece. So let's grab a stitch marker. Whoops, don't throw it away like I just did. I don't even know how I did that. It just sort of backfired on me. I'm going to take my middle stitch marker out. I won't need that anymore because we've already got our center. And there's my yarn chicken. Hello. Okay, and there you go. All right, so now what we're going to do is grab the opposite side, yes, grab a handful of stitch markers, and we're going to talk about measurements. But just quickly before we do, we have to work out which sides are the fronts and the back. Now, obviously, because we've gone back and forward, it doesn't really matter. However, I did put a stitch marker in the front of my very first piece that I worked with, just so that I could show you exactly where the front is. Now, if you look carefully at your work, you see that little thick line there. When you turn it the other way, your line sort of indents a little bit. That's the back of your work where the indent is, right there. Let me get a close up for you. That's the indent where it's pushing in. But when you're looking at the front of your work, that on top of your ribbing, you should have like a bubbled look. That's the one, that's the front, all right? So this is your front, which means your fronts need to be placed, the first front needs to be facing you this way. The next piece, the front has to be facing the other front. So you're putting your two fronts together. All right, so how you find the front on the next side, you just have a look at the bubbled area. There's the indent, that's your bubbled area. Your two bubbled areas need to match, so turn it around so both your bubble areas are opposite each other, like so. All right, that's how we're going to start it. All right, now what you have to do is you have to get the front and the back together. So grab this stitch marker from here. I don't know what I've done there. It's kind of upside down, the stitch marker, isn't it? And attach the stitch marker from one piece right over to the other piece, straight in the top. Now, if you're looking for, let me get a close-up of it for you. Like that. You're looking for the top of the stitch. It's the very, very top of that last single crochet right there. So you're doing that there, yes. Now you're going to the opposite side. There. And there. Okay, now you move over to the other side and you do exactly the same. So you're popping your two fronts and your backs together. All right. At both sides of the shoulder, making sure you're getting into that very first single crochet. Don't skip it. I know that tail can get in the way and look tricky, but don't skip it. Okay. Go over to the opposite side. Stitch marker into the first. On both sides. This one's easier because it's got the thread attached to it. All right. Okay. Alrighty, from here, it's falling off the table. Sorry guys, let me fix that up. You're going to grab a darning or a sewing or a weaving needle, whatever you want to call it. They look very similar to that. Some have a little flick on the end, some look like this. It doesn't matter, they're all the same. Now, with the threads that you've left on your work, and if you haven't, just cut yourself a piece of thread because we're going to sew the top of this together. Before you start sewing, however, make sure that both your sides match in length. I've got 4 treble rows and 4 single crochet rows for my length. Now I'm fairly short, okay? You may have needed more and that's okay. So make sure that they're exactly the same. Not just on that side, but on the opposite side as well, because once you start sewing, it's going to be hard to come undone. Truly it is. All right, now we're going to make sure you're sewing on this side where the dint is facing in, yeah? All right, and here we go. Now, how do we sew it, I hear you ask? Entirely up to you. I just kind of go like this. I don't know if it's called a whip stitch. I can't remember anymore. It's been a while. So I just grab that little thread that is actually attached to my work. And if you haven't got one attached, just cut one long thread and use one strand only to sew this part up. Okay, so you just grab your needle and you pop it in your stitch like so. So the actual needle is going through the whole stitch. And then you go to the opposite side of the stitch and you pop your yarn through. Now, if you haven't made a knot on yours, make a knot before you continue. All right, now all I'm going to do is go over. So I come back into that second stitch and go into the second stitch there. So I'm actually going like that. I can get that to go through and just going over it. So it's literally going like that. So I'm going from the front to the back, making sure you're going into all the correct stitches. So it's the first stitch, the second stitch, now I'm in the third stitches. Hope that makes sense. Third stitch on this side, third stitch on this side. Now fourth stitch on this side and fourth stitch on this side, and you're going through the whole stitch, not splitting the yarn like I just did there. All right, literally making sure you are going through the whole. And if it helps you, just go through the front, yes, like that, and then go through the back. I find that a little bit difficult, to be honest with you. It's almost like you can mess up a stitch, or you can end up in the same stitch as before. So just make sure you're going the way you want to go. So there's your next stitch and there's your next stitch, and off you go. All right, there we go. I'm not going to let you sit here and watch me do this. I would like for you to head off on your own and stitch this side together. And when we get to the end of the row, we can talk about what we're going to do next. All right, so off you go. Do your sides together like that all the way until you get to the edge there. When you get to your second last stitch, wait for me there and I'll show you what we're going to do next. Alrighty, here we are at the end of the row, guys, and if you're anything like me, let's get a nice close-up. You can probably find yourself getting a tiny little bit confused here. We'll take off that stitch marker, and I've got a lot of threads hanging off. It's my problem. That'll teach me. All right, I've done my second last stitch of both sides. I'm going into my very last stitch of that side and very last stitch of the opposite side, pulling that through. And what I might do, just for a little bit of reinforcement, go through it a second time. But before you go through the second time, now this is just for reinforcement, grab your thread if you've got enough, wrap it around your hook a couple of times, and let's try a needle, and just pop your loop through, and you should get that like little knotted effect. Push it right down like so. And then all you're doing is weaving your end in through the top of that stitch there, making sure you can't see your needle from the front, and you can't. There, through one side, and weaving it back through to the opposite side again, because you want to have reinforcement here. Yeah. Oh, it's all very thick there. Yeah, see how it's come through? You don't want that look. All right, you don't want it to come through. There we go. That looks better. Perfect. Now we're going to pop that through like so. I think 2 is enough. And then if you want to leave that tail, you can, and you can crochet over that tail. I think we're done with that. I'm not going to bother. Okay. Now, and if you wanted to, when you get to this side, if you've got any tails, you can actually reinforce that. All right, that is one side of your piece done. If you want to turn it around and have a look-see, that is what you're looking at. Gorgeous. Yes. All right, guess what? You have another side. Okay, so I want you to do the same to this side right here. Find a piece of thread that's hanging off your work, whichever side, and just do exactly the same to the top, and then meet me back here and we will talk about measurements. Alrighty guys, what you should have is that. Yes, now I've got threads still sticking out everywhere which I have to fix up, so don't worry about mine. But as it is, just grab your piece and pop it over you like so. Like that. Now it should be really big, yeah, because that is what a boxy jumper should look like. If you pop your sleeves together, your sides together, you should have lots of space to play in, and that's why we call it a boxy jumper, because it's kind of really just a straight down kind of thing. Your ribbing should have a tiny little bit of a tug to it, not a lot. It should be stretchy kind of, yeah. If it has a lot, you haven't put enough ribbing in, okay? But don't stress, don't change it now. We're not going to change it now. All right, so what we have to do now is we have to figure out, before we do anything else, how wide do we want our sleeves to go. Now, being a boxy jumper, let's just say for argument's sake, I put my stitch marker here. Being a boxy jumper, it's going to look a little silly with that being really loose and this being really tight, yes? So you kind of need to give yourself some proper leeway. There are many ways you can do this. You can use your measuring tape to go down from under your arm, right in the middle of the armpit, right down to your rib cage right there. All right, that's one way. So if you go like that and you measure your piece from the top right down to the rib cage, okay, that's one way to do it. All right, but what we're going to do is we're not going to do that. We're going to do it, well, it's a little bit unorthodox, but it's to suit your measurements. Now, if I was to say, right, go down by 8 inches, 10 inches, 12 inches, whatever, I could give you any number I wanted to, yes? I'm not going to do that because that's a number that I could have invented or someone else could have invented. Let's do it to work your body. Let's just grab a few stitch markers and pop them in. And just see if that's how much space you would like your arm to go. So we're going to do it as rough as we can, but I'm going to try and make sure that I've got most of my side seam straight enough. All right, I'm just going to try and get it as straight as I possibly can. And I'm going to pick any space for now, right? Just any space. See what it looks like. Okay. Now let's say I was happy with that width, which to be honest with you, it's really big. It's far too big. Look how big that sleeve's going to be. It is a boxy jumper, so that would still look nice, yeah? But I'm going to make mine that little tiny bit higher, maybe just about there. So I'm going to grab another stitch marker, any colour you like, it doesn't matter. I might use the darker one, doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter at all. And just go up by 1 one treble. Yeah, one treble on both sides. So pop that through, take off the other one that you just put in, and there's another one. That's another section. Now that for me is plenty of room because I don't have such a big arm, and then look how much space there is there. Let me measure my space for you so you understand. Yeah, so from the top of my shoulder, right in the middle, right down to there, if you were to do it professionally, you would go all the way over here, right there, and you would come right across there, right across there. So the point of your chest, right there, very, very point of your chest, right across would be it. And I've just made a bit of a hole just with my nail. Can you believe it? As you do. And that's where it would be. It's pretty much where I want it to be, right opposite. Let me show you. That's your chest right across. Okay, I'm hoping this is making sense. If you were to measure your chest across that way, it's exactly where your stitch marker lands. All right, so initially, professionally, that is how it should be done. All right, it should be done like that, and like that. And it lands right on your stitch marker. Hoping that makes sense. Now this, again, is a boxy jumper. So if you wanted to make yours that little bit lower, by all means, drop it. If you want to make it a bit higher, just be wary that once you attach your sleeves, that's going to be really tight up there and really boxy down the bottom. It's not going to look right, is it? So probably better the lower. Look, I keep putting my nail through this top. Probably better the lower, the better, if that makes any sense at all. All right. And if you're worried about the exact measurements, I'll give you my exact measurements. That doesn't mean we're going to be the same because I'm, I don't know, extra large maybe. Large, extra large. Shh, don't tell anyone. So everybody's extra large is different because I may be extra large in width, but I'm rather short from here to here. So it's not the average length. Yeah. So that's why I say measure it to suit your armhole. Just as long as you've got enough space to play with before you do anything. Now we're not sewing these side seams now. I'll show you what we're going to do right now. Alrighty guys, so what we have now initially is the top of your jumper already sewn together. We're still working on the wrong side now, okay, because insides were inside there, remember? Okay, and you've got your little stitch marker attached here. This is where you need your measuring tape. Okay, so grab your measuring tape. Now I know for a fact, I've already done my measurements, but I know for a fact from the top of my piece of work right into the center of my stitch marker measures 25 centimeters or 10 inches. Now I know that for a fact because I measured that before. So I need you to measure yours and find out exactly how much yours makes and then double it. So mine's 25 centimeters, which is there. So I actually need 50 centimeters, which is there or just under 20 inches, like 19.75, okay? So by doing that, this is allowing me not to worry about doing too much math, okay? We need a circumference of 50 centimeters for our sleeve hole, yeah? That's what it's telling us. So what I did was, this is how clever I was. You don't have to do this. I just did it because I thought it was easier for me. I think it's a lot easier anyway because then you don't have to do too much counting, yeah? You just grab your, whatever your piece was. Mine was 50. Just measure it up to your piece. Right over to wherever you get to your 50, which mine was there. Count your trebles across. Mine counted 84 trebles. I hope that's made any sense to you. Now, because we are working on our sleeves, we're going to start doing our ribbing of our sleeves. Because we are working on our sleeves, if I was to do 84, 84 84 ribbing rows. This is how big my sleeve would be. Do I want my sleeve that big? Up the top I do, because that's the armhole part, but down here I don't want that much. I don't even want 3/4 of it. I want only half of it. So what I did was I calculated I'm going to be doing the ribbing row of 42 single crochet rows across to make my 84. So I've divided it in half. So for me, I need 42 single crochet rows of the ribbing. Okay, I'm not sure what you came up with because your armhole may be a little bit different. So what you need to do is measure your armhole, multiply it by 2, then measure the width across your work. Give your work a stretch while you're measuring it, because you don't want it to be too loose, right? Don't stretch it too much because you don't want to, make it too tight. So give your work a measurement. Measure it right across to whatever your measurement came to. Mine came to 50. If yours went to 35, then that's what you do. If yours went to 65, then that's what you do. Then you add up all your trebles in the row, and that is the amount of trebles you will need for the entire section of your armhole. Yes? So to do that, you need to divide that amount in half. So whatever you came up with across this way, divide it in half if you're going to do the ribbing like mine. Now let me show you mine. My ribbing looks like this. Okay, it looks pretty much like that. You've got some movement in there, and yet it's not as loose as it would be if I did the whole 84 stitches, yes? So it's up to you what you want to do, okay? But I've done mine like that, divided my measurement from this in half and came up with this. All right, I'm hoping this is making sense, yes? Keeping everything the same, just move your large piece of work out the way, because right now we are going to work on our ribbing. Okay, so what you need to do for the ribbing, from memory, we are chaining on 11. Okay, so grab your thread. Oh, let me bring that up again. Make your loop. You've been doing all along, you know how to do this. All right, and chain your 11. Okay, so yarn over your hook once, twice, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. All right, now right across we're going to put 10 single crochets. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and right there is your 10th single crochet. All right, chain 1, turn your work. Remember to mark off your rows. This is your first row, okay? Single crochet into your first stitch. You know how to do this part, yes? Now, single crochet in the back loops. Remember how we did our ribbing? In the back loops of the next 8 stitches. Oh, don't split the yarn like I just did. That's terrible. 1, 2. Hope you're using your stitch markers, guys. I know I didn't, and I do apologise there, but use your stitch markers all the way across your row, making sure you have 8 single crochets in your back loop and 1 single crochet in each of the first and last stitches. So these are back loops all the way, right there. And there's our very last stitch right there. Chain 1, turn your work. Don't forget to mark it off. That's rows 1 and 2, yeah? So that's it, and that's all I want you to do. Do your rows as we've been doing them all along in the past for our ribbing, as many rows as your half measurement came to. Now mine came to 42 centimetre, I'm sorry, let's try 42 rows. Hello, wake up, Mary. Mine came to 42 rows, so I need to do 42 rows of our ribbing. All right, so go ahead and do the amount of rows that you need and meet me back here in a moment and we'll talk about sleeve lengths. All right, alrighty guys, I have done my rows and mine are actually 42 rows. I'm not sure what you came up with, but mine were 42. All right, now the reason I wanted you to do half of the amount is because this is where we're going to be doing our doubling across. Okay, now do we remember how we did our ribbing for the fronts and the backs? We got to the end of the last row, we chained one. Actually we didn't, we actually turned our work to the side. We chained 1, 2 and 3 because we're going to put double crochets across here in those little spaces that you see. Yeah, and there's little gaps right there. You'll see them and you'll know them. But we're not just putting double crochets, we're putting 2 double crochets in each stitch. And this is why I said to divide your work in half, because we're going to double it now. Because if we've done 42 rows, or in my case, if I've done 42 rows of ribbing, then I need to do 42 double crochets across. But by putting 2 in each space, I will end up doubling it, making it 84. And that is what I need for the final measurement of my sleeve. So let's just do a row of double crochet. All right, but before we do, just grab your stitch marker and pop it in the top of that chain right there. I have a funny feeling I just split that, but I'll fix that up at the end of the row. And now, ordinarily we would jump into the first one and, count 8 across or whatever you counted for your other ribbing. We're not going to do that now because we've got our 42 rows in my case. I need 84 double crochets across. So I'm going to double it and put 2 in each stitch. Instead of 1, I'm going to put 2. I've already got 1. These 3 chains will act as a double crochet in there, but I'm going to pop a double crochet in the same space. So yarn over my hook into the space, doing a normal double crochet. So in actual fact, your chains will act as double crochet there. So in actual fact, you've got 2 double crochets in that space. Now you just go to your very next space, which is right there, and you put 2 double crochets in there. In the space, do your double crochet, 2 and 2, and then do another 1, 2, 2, and then do 2 double crochets in every space or stitch across your row. I'm sorry, going too fast for you, do apologise. 2 in every stitch you see, 1 and 2. Now if you counted your rows properly and it was the exact amount, then you will have the exact amount of double crochets across the row that you will need for your trebles when you do them. Okay, so I had 42 across. By the end of the row I should have 84, which is exactly what I needed. Not sure what you needed, but that's what I needed. All right, so go ahead and do your 2 double crochets in every stitch all the way across, and I shall meet you there at the end of the row. So go ahead and do that now, and I'll meet you right there in a moment. Alrighty guys, what we should have now is this look. Now this is normal where it bubbles like that, don't stress. Later, once we attach our sleeve, it's going to look like that. A tiny little bit tight around the wrist and flary all the way up to the top of our arm. That is normal. Alright, so we're going to go straight into it. I've got to my second last stitch, and now I'm about to do my last stitch. So it's yarn over your hook and pop your hook in your last stitch with your 2 double crochets. So it was 2 double crochets in every stitch across. You should now have your desired length. Okay, that way. All right, now what we're going to do, chain 1, turn our work. Like we did with our fronts and our backs, it's exactly the same. We're going to single crochet into the first stitch. Then for the rest of the row, but before we do, let's pop a stitch marker because yours truly always forgets those, doesn't she? All right, stitch marker there. And for the rest of the row, we're going to do a single crochet in your back loop. Remember how we did that? And that's for the whole entire row until you get to your last stitch. which you do a normal double crochet in. But for now, I'm sorry, try normal single crochet. Just do your single crochets all the way across your row. Now this is super duper easy, yeah, and you'll fly through it. It'll be nice and quick. All right, so head off on your own, do your single crochets in the back loop, get to your second last stitch, and I shall meet you up there. Alrighty guys, here we are at the end of the row. I have one more stitch to make right in that stitch marker stitch there. And there you go. Remove your stitch marker. And guess what? You're going to begin the pattern, the same pattern that we used for our fronts and backs. But before you do, let's go and check out some measurements. Alrighty guys, remember how we popped stitch markers in there before? So we were to see how our width of our sleeve is. So what you do is you grab your sleeve and some measuring tape, because measuring tape will help you a lot here. I could give you a measurement of any kind, right, and say, right, do 20 centimeters, do 50 centimeters, do 100 centimeters. That would be no good for you, okay, because your arm totally different than anyone else's. Everyone is unique in their own way, yeah. So what we do is we grab our little piece like that and we pop it there, yeah. So from here it's got to go all the way up to there. Now if you wanted to get real pedantic, see where your sleeve hole ends? From there all the way down to your arm is pretty much the amount of rows you will need, right? So you could count those rows up, or you could just fold it in half and just keep going and going and going and going, right? And when you get to say 20 rows, 30 rows, whatever rows that you think you may need, right? You get a couple of stitch markers and attach it to the sleeve, right? And attach it down here just with the stitch markers and measure it yourself, on yourself. Now, if you look carefully at the boxy top, the sleeve starts low down. So you're not going to need as many rows as you would if you were doing it from top to the top, right up to the shoulder seams. Okay, so you're going to be cutting yourself down that many rows. So if you wanted to get pedantic and do measurements, which I know a lot of people do, there's actually two ways you can do this. You can measure from there to there and work your measurements down from there to there, if you like. Or you can do a sneaking measurement, which is what I like to do, yeah? I like to grab, see that, from there, all the way down to there, because that's pretty much where your wrist ends, right? Your wrist ends pretty much down to the very bottom part of your work, or as how long it goes to that spot there. And pretty much count your rows. Seriously, this is the way I've done it. Go across there, count your rows from there all the way up to there, and that's roughly how many rows you will need for your sleeve. But once again, my suggestion is not to worry too much about measurements, but to keep trying it on your arm. What we're going to do now is head over to the workstation and we'll finalise what we need to do before part 3. Alrighty, so you've come to terms of what sort of measurement you may be looking at. Remember, it's all about trial and error when it comes to your own sizing, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start you off right here. And what we need to do is we're doing our treble row. So it's chain 1, 2, 3, and 4. Place your little stitch marker there, like so. Turn your work. And like we did with our fronts and our back, we're going to start our treble row with the front loop. Now we are already in there, that stitch. Let me get a nice close up so you can see. We're already in that stitch right there. So the very next stitch is here, but we want to go front loop only. So we're just picking up the first loop. Remember we had those 2 loops right there? Now I can't get the second loop on. Remember the 2 loops? Yes? We just want that very front loop there for your first stitch. So do your treble in that front loop, 2, 2, and 2. You know how to do this. And now you're going to do your treble in your back loop. A little bit difficult to find in this row because it's our first row of trebles, and now that's too close, isn't it, guys? I do apologize. All right, so treble again in your front loop of your next stitch, and you know what to do here. Treble in your back loop, and so on, all the way across your row. Okay, all right, there we go. So it's front, back, front, back, front, back, and so on all the way until you get to your very last stitch. Make it your second last stitch right there, and I shall meet you up in a moment. Alrighty guys, this is where you should be up to now. Alright, let's have a look. Have a feeling this sleeve's going to go a lot quicker than I thought it would be, which is good. Now, it doesn't matter what treble stitch you ended up with at the end of the row. Just remember to remain consistent. Now, I have a second last stitch there. Just remain consistent throughout your work, all right? Now, with your very last stitch right there, you yarn over your hook twice like normal, and you pop into the actual stitch, not the back loop, in the actual stitch itself. Pull a loop through and continue your treble stitch like normal, taking out that stitch marker for starters. All right, so that's what you have for now. Now, as you can see, it's starting to look really big and bubbly. Normal, 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 okay? Chain 1, turn your work. Okay, single crochet in that very first stitch as normal. Stitch marker in, like so. And guess what? You're doing exactly the same that you were doing for your fronts and your back. You're just doing your single crochet row all the way across your piece. All right, I'm not going to sit here and let you watch me do that all the way. Do your single crochet all the way, get to that stitch marker, and we'll talk about what's going to happen next. Alrighty guys, here we are at the end of our single crochet row. Let me do that. Alright, let's have a look-see. Okay, so I've popped a single crochet my last stitch, or second last stitch. Now I need to go directly in here, and I think I've split that yarn, so I'm going to take my stitch marker out. You can go ahead and do yours. So pop your single crochet in your stitch marker stitch. Yours truly, as usual, tends to split it. Alright, pull the loop through and do your single crochet like normal. Now you are chaining 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4. I did that a little bit loose this time on purpose so I don't split it. Alright, turn your work like normal. Okay, let me get a close-up for this one again so you can have a look-see. Start your treble. Now, remember your trebles before, how I started with a front loop. I'm assuming you did too. If you started with a front loop, that's what you start with in every row, okay? Now, we're not popping it in here because we're already in here with our chains. We're going into that very next stitch there, into the loop, pull a loop through, yarn over, 2, yarn over, 2, yarn over, 2, and straight into your next stitch, which is a back loop right there. Pull a loop through, yarn over, 2, 2, and 2. Let me bring that out. I just realized how close that was now. Sorry about that, guys. All right, so your next one is your front loop. And your next one is your back loop. Next one, front. Next one, and back. Alrighty, that's it. That's all I'm going to show you today, guys. That is it. Alright, what we're going to do now is have a quick chat about where we are going from here. Alrighty, now let me just show you something here. This is a sleeve. Let me bring that out. It's already out. This is a sleeve that I've already completed. I'll put it this way for you. so you can have a look at it. Now you're looking at it thinking, is that tiny? It is tiny for two reasons. One, I'm short, okay, and the other one is also, let me grab the piece, your actual bodice itself. All right, I don't know if I can fit it all in, I probably can't, but I'm not going to worry too much about it. That is the side of your bodice, right? Now, if you remember correctly, when you pop your sleeve on, it's going to look like that. But if you remember correctly, this part of your neck, remember, is going to have 5 centimeters or 2 inches of ribbing. Okay, now your sleeve is going to drop off the shoulder, raglan, I think they call the sleeve. It's going to drop off your shoulder by that much. So literally your sleeve will start from there. So my sleeve is actually complete. Okay, so what I'm going to do, and I know a lot of people are new to crochet, and you're probably thinking, so how long do I make mine? Even though you showed me measurements and everything, how long do I make mine? If you're not sure, okay, just go ahead and make 15 rows of your trebles and 15 rows of your single crochet all the way through. Finish off with your last row of single crochet. So you've got 15 rows trebles, 15 rows single crochets. Get to that, don't cast off, okay? Because what we'll do when we return to do part 3, we will have a bit of a play at what it would look like on us. I'm not going to do that now. It's just take a little bit longer, and the video's gone for too long already. So what I'm going to do is upload part 3 on Friday at the end of this week, all right? So for now, this is part 2. All I need you to do is to finish off that sleeve that we started before, and then do the second sleeve. Don't cast off. Now the reason being is because if you are nice and tall, you will have nice long arms, not little shorty ones like me, but that's okay. I don't mind being short, okay? But at least if you get to your 15 rows, it'll give you an idea of whether you need to make your rows longer or whether that's the perfect size for you. Now you will know that once we get together on part 3 of our Trebleberry Boxy Jumper. In the meantime, guys, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share and do all those wonderful things that you guys, well, pretty much already do for me. And don't forget, guys, if you want to join us on our lives, Wednesday at 4 p.m, and Saturday mornings 10 a.m, that's Melbourne, Australia time, by the way. Every week we will talk more about the boxy jumper, and we also have a lot of fun in our lives as well. So thank you so much for watching. Continue on with this sleeve and your next sleeve, and I shall meet you back here very soon. Ciao for now.